about the speaker and what they've done and where they've been and all of those things. I'm going to start a little bit differently. Instead of me telling you about me, clearly there's an obligation organizationally to do things to prevent this from occurring. How does it happen? When you have an organization that doesn't provide recognition, satisfying career paths, lack of job security, the organization is going through change, little to no satisfaction in your job. These are things that cause the issue of bullying to become more prevalent in organizations. When the organizational culture is that whack-a-mole culture, if you would, you know, like the old arcade game where if you rear your head with an idea or a suggestion, they take the mallet and smack you back down because we really don't care what you think, we just want you to go back to your desk and do your job. As a result, people tend now to not speak up, and they also don't speak up when they hear and see these behaviors going on. Other characteristics of a bully-prone organization, when it's all about make the numbers, whatever those numbers are, and they don't care how you get there short of breaking the law. But now you have an organization that fear is the dominant behavior in the workplace. Bullying has a tendency to rear its head. When speaking up means taking a risk, bullying can take a strong root in the organization because people won't take the risk and say what they just heard and saw because they don't want to now have someone target them. It means they can lose face, make enemies. In many instances, they end up losing opportunities because the bullies, again, are bosses who will withhold those from people who are letting those know what's going on. From the context of who is being targeted, it is not like the schoolyard situation. The people being targeted most often come from every background imaginable, more women than men. Men bully women more than other men. Women bully other women more than they bully men. So women are catching it from both sides. Additionally, non-aggressive types in the workplace tend to be the ones that are also getting bullied. Those that don't join the cliques and the groups in the organization, they just come in and get their work done, tend to get bullied more. The context of this is knowing that normally when you are getting bullied, the individual being bullied is a type that refuses to now hand over control in the workplace to what they do. They want to do their job and do it well. It intimidates the boss in many cases. These are people that have high expectations for authority, are sympathetic, tend to be talented, creative. Think about it. These are the people, if you're hiring people, that you want on your team. But these are the ones that the managers are often threatened by. Keep in mind again, tough management and bullying are not the same thing. Tough management normally targets performance issues, something that needs to be addressed to do your job better. Bullying makes it personal. It attacks character. I had a meeting very recently with a CEO and his leadership team in a company that had merged, that the CFO from the company that was acquired was required by the board to stay for 6 months to work through the financial transition. The CEO didn't like it because his CFO was let go. I'm in a meeting with all of them. The CFO says to everyone there, here are some concerns, here's what's happening cash flow wise, here's some things we need to do with our debt position. The CFO looks at him and says, well, John, you know, you must have difficulty being a 20-watt bulb working on a team full of 100 watts. And I thought to myself, nobody said a word. I said, okay, hold on. My tool to interrupt a conversation when someone steps on your metaphorical toes is to say, ouch, which I had taught them. I said, ouch, because no one spoke up. Everybody looked at me. I said, Joe, let me ask you a question. Aren't there, and let me just give you a quick touch point, anytime your toes have been stepped on, when you respond, always assume good intentions. Because if you assume good intentions, your response comes from a place that's much easier for them to hear than when you now respond with, well, you only said that to me because I'm, pick whatever the issue is you see yourself through. But when you assume good intentions, Joe, I'm sure you probably meant well when you said that. However, let me tell you how that landed for me when I heard it. I'm getting tapped under the table. I'm sorry, but after the third tap on the foot, I turned to the guy and said, well, why are you tapping my foot? Now he's looking at me like, oh, you called me out. If it's that important, you tap me 3 times, say what you got to say. Well, we normally don't talk to the CEO like that in this meeting. I said, well, first of all, he's a CEO, he's not my daddy. Number 2, I've been paid already. Before I showed up, my check has cleared the bank, and I have a ticket in my pocket to fly home that you can't cancel. My job is to tell you who the ugly kids in the room are, and guess who the ugliest kid in the room is right now? That's not an acceptable conversation among adults, and especially from someone who's in a position of authority, because you're telling everybody else it's okay for them to do it on their teams. The CEO looked at me and he said, "Nobody has talked to me like that in a long time." I said, "And your point is?" Honestly, I'm a Kurt, that's why I'm a consultant. He said, "I appreciate it," because I didn't realize the impact of what I said. Sometimes things come to mouth before my brain catches up with them. I said, "Well, one, I'm appreciative that you took it the way you did, because you could have asked me to leave." But he probably hadn't read the fine print. There was a cancellation clause in the contract, so he had to write me another check. But he took it well because he realized it was what needed to be said. The secret to knowing if you've got inappropriate fear in the workplace normally tells you that bullying has become a prevalent part of the culture. The way you start fixing this organizationally: one, organizations are creating what are called respectful workplace policies, because you would think these behaviors are already things in your policy statements, but normally they are not. Setting up a bully-free workplace means there also has to be training, because what you consider to be respect and what someone else considers to be respect might be two completely different things. And you need to talk through and define what does this look like so everybody's on the same page, because the normal response when people are called out on this is, "I didn't know that was being disrespectful." And in some cases they truly may not, because people come from so many cultural backgrounds that something that is disrespectful to one person might just be standard operating procedure to someone else. But that doesn't mean that it's acceptable. First step is to ensure, from your perspective of training and development in the education department, that these become topics in conversations that you have in your workshops. Secondly, that you have policy statements that reinforce what this is and is not, what can and cannot be done, so people have recourse as to what to do when they run into these behaviors. And three, provide help for those people who are going through it, because in this room, there are multiple people right now being bullied in the workplace. Mistakes many organizations make: one, assume that there are people who are untouchable because of their position or title. No one is untouchable. Another is that they blame the victim and just say, as we call it here in Texas, cowboy up or man up and deal with it. Well, that's easy to say when it's someone else going through it, but when the bullseye on you, it's not so easy to say cowboy up, man up, and deal with it. Realize that there's bullies at every level, including at the senior leadership level. Recognize that in most cases, bullies won't stop just because you hope they will. Supervisors and managers, one, never assume that just because it's not visible, that's not happening on your team. Pay attention when conversations are taking place. Doesn't mean going on a witch hunt. Don't blame the victim when somebody comes forward and says there's a problem. Deal with the problem. Bullying is not simply tough management. Know that it's inappropriate behaviors. Bullies, in the context of this, the trend needs to be stopped as soon as it's noticed. As soon as you sense someone is heading down that path, say ouch, stop the conversation, and let's talk about what it is. Again, assuming good intentions that I just saw. That's not going to happen any longer. One of the things that I will tell you as well is that people, if you're a bully in this room, even a mild bully, you can't call anybody out. Because at the end of the day, my favorite quote from Emerson is, "How can I hear what you say when what you do speaks so loudly in my ears?" Until you clear your lanes, don't ask anybody else to clear theirs. And sometimes the people you work with, those friends, can tell you if you are a bully. Signs to watch for: when you have staff shortages in one area, people keep leaving one department at a disproportionately high number, there's normally an issue with there being a bully boss in that department. It's not that everybody in that department is being encouraged to climb the corporate ladder. Some folks will take a step down just to get out because they don't want to continue to work for this person any longer. Recognize when people are being forced to work excessive hours, poorly defined jobs, lack of clarity around expectations. All of these create opportunities for bullying. Steps at a minimum to take: create policies that deal with this topic, define acceptable and unacceptable, and put sanctions in place that are progressive disciplinary programs that say, here's how we're going to handle it when this issue manifests itself. When somebody comes to you, take it seriously. Don't assume that they're just coming with a complaint or whining, because in essence, this behavior isn't normally just one person in that department. They're normally other people, and they're also normally your top producers that are being targeted. Find out what the behaviors are, how long it's been going on, how widespread, if people feel their safety is threatened as a result of it, because bullying can escalate to physical confrontation and physical violence in the workplace. It's unfortunate, but almost every instance in the news where you hear someone going back into their job and pulling out a weapon and shooting people up in the workplace, listen to the interviews that happen the next day and the following day when they're interviewing people. What you often find is that person was being bullied at work, had told others about it, came back targeting the bully and the coworkers who knew, but said and did nothing about it. Until there's a new town, and I am not hoping this happens, I pray it never does, but until there's a new town-like incident in the workplace where people end up getting hurt as a result of it, most of the legislative members are not going to do anything on this topic because they have substantial dollars given to them by the Corporate Association of Attorneys saying, do not vote on this issue. It's unfortunate, but that's how the game works. I just hope at some point we find courage to speak up. Because if we don't, history has already shown what collusion will do. Collusion is defined this way. When you see it, hear it, know what's happening, but say and do nothing, that's colluding. In Germany, this occurred. Reverend Niemöller said during the height of Nazi Germany, first they came for the communists, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the Catholics, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Catholic. And then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't Jewish. And then they came for me, only there was nobody left to speak up. If you don't find your voice when it's someone else, how can you expect somebody else to find theirs? Remember, addressing and preventing this issue is everyone's responsibility, not just one person's responsibility. It's not easy, but now that you know, what are you going to do when you run into bullying later today or tomorrow? Because you're going to see it again and you're going to see it soon. That bullying is a chance to define your character and reaction. When you see it, are you going to be a carrot, an egg, or a coffee bean? If you're a carrot goes in the boiling water of adversity hard, but it turns soft once it hits the boiling water. An egg goes into the boiling water of adversity fragile, but it turns hard very quickly because of the heat. However, the coffee bean goes into the boiling water and it changes its environment. It turns the water into coffee. The challenge is, are you going to be a carrot, egg, or coffee bean when you run into it? The last thing I will share with you, you will not get back into the office and have 10 minutes without somebody saying, did you go to that bullying thing? What was it about? Don't assume that everybody asks you cares. There's some people who think that this whole conversation is a waste of time. If I wasted an hour of your time, please accept my apology. But I hope you realize you won't have an hour to answer them. You won't have 10 minutes. Consider how you're going to answer. But consider to whom you're talking, because not everybody cares. Here's the last thought I'll leave you with. There were two pilots who had flown relief missions into the jungle. They just dropped off their supplies. The plane is now getting ready to head back out and go into town to get more. As the plane clears the treetops, the young co-pilot hears a noise in the cockpit. He turns to the captain and he says, sir, somehow as the ground crew emptied the plane out, a snake got on board. We need to turn the plane around and get him on here to get the snake out. The captain didn't say a word. He pushed forward on the throttle, hits 5,000 feet, and keeps climbing. As the plane is climbing, the snake starts to ease over by the captain's chair. And the young guy says, sir, maybe you didn't hear me. Sir, there's not a snake on the plane. There's a snake on the plane. Let's get this thing on the ground so the ground crew can get it out of here. Cap doesn't say a word. Throttles down. He's now at 15,000 feet. Only now the snake stops moving. The young guy unbuckles and he walks over and he kicks the snake and it's dead. But he turns to Cap and he says, Cap, that snake I've been telling you about, sir, it's dead. And I get the impression you knew it was going to die, but how could you have possibly known that? First time Cap spoke, he said, son, listen to me. I've been flying planes all my life. And the one thing I learned very early in life is that snakes can't live at high altitudes. When you get back into the workplace and you run into the snakes, push forward on the throttle, keep climbing. Remember, snakes can't live at high altitudes. Thank you for allowing me.